What's brilliant is my guest that I've got in the studio now. Like the hairs are going up on his arms. Now, the bid is still in its early stages. There are a few hurdles yet. But the president of Asia Rugby is Qais Al-Dalai, who apparently is also an Emirati, says that the Gulf could deliver, and I quote, the most successful Rugby World Cup ever. Big words. But could we pull it off? Well, I'm joined now in the studio by Benjamin Van Rooyen, a South African, so that's why the hairs on your arms were going up. He is the CEO of Asia Rugby, and he has really done me the great honour of joining me in the studio this Eid holiday morning. Benjamin, thank you so much. You should be relaxing by the beach, and instead you're here in my studio.
Thank you very much, Georgia. Firstly, Eid Mubarak to everybody that's celebrating it. Thank you for picking this day because no traffic, so I got you early. Yeah. So you're right. The hair did stand up. And having been in the Gulf, in Dubai specifically for 22 years, this is actually a rugby mad culture here, especially amongst the expats. But we also have seen the rugby culture grow amongst Emiratis. I was fortunate to be one of the first coaches. Boys who are now men who now have children, and there's some girls in the national side that, they still call me coach, after how many years. So, yes, I think the news came quickly.
Yeah.
And I just had a look online, and it came from everywhere, from MSN. I'm thinking, wow, so if they pay interest into this, so it is a good news story. It is something that would excite us. I think the positive is we're talking 2035, 2039. It's still very far away. But I think in principle, there's no harm in us dreaming about this or just contemplating this or just having discussions about this. This could be, I could see this being discussed over barbecues and in restaurants and so on. And everything starts with a dream, And I think in terms of a timeline, if we think of Japan hosting the World Cup in 2019, the seed was planted in 2008 when World Rugby, that was called IRB then, invited countries, and I think about 15 countries put their hands up. But knowing the Japanese, that could have been the concept could have started in the early 2000s already. So for us to say 2039, it sounds very far away.
It does. But that's where, like you say, that's where dreams start. You need to have a decent sort of headway, a decent length of time to build up to these. I mean, what kind of groundwork would you say has already been laid in the UAE, Saudi Arabia and Qatar to make this kind of bid a reality?
Okay. So firstly, as you know, in this region, none of us can speak on behalf of countries, on behalf of national federations. So just to give you a little bit of a background, I'm sure everybody that's in Dubai, that's been listening to Dubai covering a lot of rugby, would know that Dubai Sevens is iconic.
Huge.
In terms of the footfall that we get, it's close to 100,000 over those 3 days, with at one stage 240 other teams playing. So it is Dubai Sevens, and I've spoken to a lot of people, and it's on their bucket list. So if you look at the UAE, I think the capacity to host, yes, it's there. The interest in rugby, yes. In terms of government support for the national side and the rugby programs, yes. So that ticks the box. If we look at Saudi, new kid on the block, but at the pace that they're moving, when we see what they've done with MMA and Formula One, etc. So there's definitely an appetite in Saudi with sports-related tourism, to say, okay, we can host it. And it's one of those countries where they're not struggling with land, for instance. So if you want to build a dedicated rugby stadium, it would not be a problem. They don't have the same problems that you would have in Europe, etc. So as a federation, Saudi Rugby is still very much where Dubai was, I would say, perhaps 20, 25 years ago. Mm-hmm. But the passion is there. I know the people who work there. I know the president. I know the president of the federation, so I know how much effort they're putting in. So for them, I think a long haul, if you talk 2035, 39, that's still far away. So a lot can happen. And then the other one is Qatar, of course. Qatar Rugby has been established. They're playing domestically. They've played internationally. I think it's quite a stable federation in that sense. But when we talk Qatar, we also think what has recently happened over the last couple of years in terms of Qatar Airways putting their hands in their pockets.
Oh, I hadn't thought of that. That's really relevant.
Yes, yes. So and we never understood when Qatar Airways started with the Qatar Airways Cup. They sold out Twickenham within a few hours, South Africa versus New Zealand. And the next year it was South Africa versus Wales, sold out Twickenham again, etc., etc. So I think that's my opinion. I think they were just testing the waters.
That is interesting. That shows that maybe this announcement isn't the first glimmer of thought around it, that in fact the first glimmer of thought happened quite a while ago, potentially. You suddenly get the way, you see the jigsaw pieces moving into place, don't you?
Correct. And you hear people saying things that you thought you were the only one who thought it when you were in the shower, So like, where did that
come from?
Yeah.
Okay, so how much support do you have from World Rugby at this stage? Because we know that Asia Rugby is all in, enthusiastic, can't wait, let's do this. Are World Rugby open to the idea of a winter tournament? Because it would have to be in the winter here, of course.
Similar to the Football World Cup in Qatar,
exactly.
So you can't. Okay, so I can never speak on behalf of World Rugby, firstly. Secondly, is from Asia Rugby, you're right. If these three federations, three unions would want to host it, yes, of course, Asia Rugby will always support, technically and in terms of the planning, etc. So yes, Asia Rugby, 100%. If this is the way, if this needs to be investigated, we'll support those three federations or three unions. What does World Rugby want from a Rugby World Cup? To some extent, all big events have more or less the same KPIs, what they want to achieve. I think in terms of, let me start at the top. What do you want? I mean, most people would say money. It needs to be profitable. Fortunately, since 2015, in the UK, Japan, every 4 years, we see that the profit is rising. So I don't think there's any risk of not making money out of a World Cup, because the statistics show us, the analytics from viewership, etc., etc. So firstly, it's not necessarily rugby. It's not necessarily money. It needs to be a showcase. It needs to attract people to say, wow, I've never seen this. My hair is standing up. I want to take my kids to the game or whatever. And we've actually seen with a Women's World Cup, that one was played in France, where England did very well. And the Monday or Tuesday after that, England's last game, the clubs were inundated with
inquiries.
Parents, no, they brought their girls and said,
"Oh wow,
she wants to play," and the clubs were there, blushing and saying, "We don't have a girls' program." So that links to what World Rugby would want is a legacy. They want to leave a legacy. So the legacy in France, it's been there. It's accessible, and it's not that the French need any support to love rugby, because they are passionate, and that's the same for New Zealand, etc. So I think the legacy that was left in Japan was not left in Japan only; it was left across Asia. So if you want to leave a legacy, you need to say, okay, what in the Middle East? Can the countries within 4 hours in terms of accessibility, can it be a sub-regional legacy instead of a one-country legacy? So I think legacy, finances, you want to showcase, and you want your fans to return and bring other fans. Your net promoter score has to be high, and it will always be high, because one thing that World Rugby does very, very well is they organize events very well.
Yes. Oh, my goodness, don't they?
Yeah.
Okay, so how about the criticisms that are sort of coming through already? We have to confront them. You know, the suggestion, one of the major suggestions is that, of course, none of the 3 bidding countries have ever played in a Rugby World Cup. Is that a hurdle in your view?
Okay, so, well, there's no such a thing as bad publicity.
That's true.
So if they talk about you, at least people are starting to think, if they can find the flaws in that, even good, because then it can prepare whoever's going to, whether it's going to be a single host bid or a collective host bid, it can help them prepare and say, okay, we fully understand. Okay, so if we are going to compete as a host in 15 years from now, we still have a lot of homework to do. And 15 years from now, the players are currently 13 years old, you know.
I've got a 12-year-old and an 11-year-old.
So that's it. Start the dream now.
Yeah. Honestly, well, speaking of that, and that is, let's talk about that grassroots development, because as a mother of 2 young boys who love their rugby, I mean, as soon as I mentioned this topic to them, you know, normally they're not that interested in what I'm talking about on the radio. As soon as I mentioned it, they're all in. They're like, Dad, so could I play? Mum, could I play? They don't really say, Mum, could I play? Let's be honest. But, you know, what would hosting a tournament of this scale mean for rugby in the region?
Yeah. Okay, so what can it mean? Okay, my first thought is, what will the demographics be like 15 years from now?
Good question.
If you look at the size, when I moved to Dubai in 2002, you know, there was no Palm, there was no JBR, the Arabian Ranches was not even there. So in terms of an expanding population, yes. What's the profile of the expanding population? It could be hardcore rugby supporters. So yes, it can change. I mean, if there's a population of 10 million here and 20 million in Saudi, and et cetera, so it can definitely change in 15 years. So you could have people would pay a premium price to watch rugby. Question is, are we going to fill the stadiums? I don't know. If you just look at what happened in Qatar, 96% of ticket sales.
And that was despite all the previous bad publicity. And my goodness me, there was a lot of bad publicity beforehand.
Yeah, well, it's orchestrated, you know, by your opponents. Of course, you'll always get the criticism. So to get back to your question, we don't know what it's going to be like in 15 years from now. But if we look at the infrastructure that's already here, just in Qatar with a number of stadiums that are already ready for for rugby, football, whatever. So that's the one thing that we need to take in consideration is the accessibility of these 3 countries. You know, Qatar Airways, Emirates, we know. I mean, Emirates leading brand. It's also Asia Rugby sponsor for our competitions. And then we hear about Riyadh Air that's going to come up. And if you just see in a radius of 4 or 5 hours, how many people can get here easily with a good infrastructure. So I think that's that. And then I think something else that doesn't make life easy for rugby fans in this part, or let me include the UK and Europe, is the time zones.
Ah, yeah, the times that the matches will be played.
That's right. So now going to Australia is going to be a couple of early morning rusks and coffee matches, you know.
Yeah.
That we would watch, and then if it goes to the US in 2031,
that's some late nights.
Yeah, then it's going to be late nights. So I think if you just look at the logistics in terms of the practicality, yes, it all makes sense. Yeah. So.
Exciting. It's exciting.
It is. I think when in our initial discussion about a week ago, so we were just throwing around some ideas and said, okay, where next? You know, should it be in Asia again? And then, you know, of course, Japan has everything ready. They can host one in a year's time, you know, in terms of the infrastructure. But perhaps Japan, Korea as a co-host. I'm just looking at.
You're looking at our competitors already, aren't you?
Yes, and Asia, okay, but what about Southeast Asia?
Yeah.
Perhaps Malaysia, Singapore could be, you know, and that's how we got to Well, the low-hanging fruit is the golf, isn't it? You know, and all of these positives. You're like, yeah, it does make sense. Yeah.
I'm going to leave it there, and as a note, as a possibility, which is so, and it's been so interesting speaking to you this morning, because it's clear that we've got a germ of an idea, and let's just see where it goes. It's very, very exciting.
Thank you,
Benjamin
Georgia.
Van
Thank you very
Rooyen,
much.
my goodness me, it's been an absolute pleasure to have you join us in the studio, especially on an Eid holiday. Benjamin Van Rooyen, CEO of Asia Rugby. Thank you very much indeed for your time, sir.
More of The Agenda is coming up next
on the UAE's #1 talk radio station, Dubai Eye.